Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to another Surface session. Today I'm looking at Pro Tools 12.7 to have a look to see what the performance is like on the Surface Book. Now, if you've been following this all along, you'll know that back in May when I did the mega test of everything running on the Surface Pro 4, that Pro Tools behaved extremely badly. It would click, it would pop just on the simplest of projects with just one or two effects loaded. It was awful. It rendered itself actually completely unusable on the Surface Pro 4. However, now as I'm retesting things, as I've found with Ableton Live and I've found with Studio One, the performance is much improved. There have been improvements to Pro Tools, now on version 12.7 as I say, and also there have been many improvements to the Surface Book, the Surface Pro 4, the firmware, and to Windows. All of these things combined seem to have created a situation where everything is performing much better, performing as it should have done from the start. But we're not going to dwell on old wounds. No, we're just going to move forward and show you what's happening right now in January 2017. Just to flesh out a little bit of detail, the Surface Book here is an i7 version, the Surface Pro 4 is an i5. I do all this testing on both of these and they are tweaked both in the same way using the tweak guide that's also in this YouTube channel. The audio interface I use for this is the Keith Macmillan K-Mix, this fella here. I'm using a USB audio interface that's going through a USB 2 hub at the back here into the side of the Surface Book, and I use exactly the same into the Surface Pro 4. I'm not using onboard sound because the onboard sound is really not up to it as far as latency goes and audio performance. So I recommend wholeheartedly that you use a USB audio interface. I also recommend that you have it plugged into power. I'm not interested in battery life. That doesn't interest me. I'm looking at music production and live performance where you're going to be in a situation where the thing is plugged in, because you have other bits of gear as well plugged into it, which also need to be plugged in. So I am not currently talking about battery run low power stuff. We want all the power to the road as much as possible, high quality USB audio interface with decent ASIO drivers. If we want any hope of running music production software successfully on the Surface Book and Surface Pro 4, then that's what we need, okay? Great, let's get on with it. This time around also I'm going to leave it in the sort of the laptop configuration, partly because, just to show what that's like, but also because Pro Tools requires a few keyboard shortcuts to make things work quickly, and I'm going to be doing a lot of faffing around and I sort of need those keyboard shortcuts to work, and the toolbar creator isn't quite cutting it in this situation, so I'm just going to use the keyboard and screen like this and use a combination of touch, combination of keyboard shortcuts, and all that rigmarole. We will start with the Pro Tools demo song. This demo song's been around for donkey's years. It's called Kelly Malone, Earth and Stars, and every time you run it, it completely destroys the scaling on the Surface products. I'm sure it isn't by design, it's just something really crappy about all the air instruments and air effects that come with Pro Tools. It's only the air ones. Whenever you load up Expand or any of the air instruments or effects, it just all goes crazy. I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to load up Kelly Malone, Earth and Stars, that one there, hit open. And there you have it. It throws itself into the top left corner. It thinks it's on full screen, which it isn't. All the text goes completely screwy and everything goes out of whack and it's gone super small, and the parameters and text get confused, don't know what they're doing, and messes itself all about. So I'm just going to get that off there, put that back to there, get that off. See, look, the mixer, it's all just stupid. There we go. I mean, it's fine. It's just scaled really, really far down, I guess, to original size, and up here all the menus are a bit corrupt because the text wants to be properly scaled and it's kind of not allowing it to be. All these things are irrelevant though, because actually I'm just trying to run it, because in the previous test that we did back in the mega test, it would click and pop just during the demo song. So let's see whether we've got anywhere this time around. Playback is perfect, nothing wrong with it. Not a glitch, not a glimmer, not a fiddle. CPU meter over here is pretty steady and stable, nothing funny going on. It's just all working. Other than the scaling issue, but again, we're ignoring that. It's fine, and that's awesome. I mean, again, like I was talking about with Studio One, that's how it should have been. That's how we should have seen it 6 months ago, 9 months ago, when we first got hold of the Surface Pro 4. But it has taken a long road to get to the point where this is now running exactly as we always hoped it would be. Hurrah! Right, well, that's just the demo song. Let's do something hard and try to show how much performance we can squeeze out of Pro Tools on the Surface Book and Surface Pro 4. Right, what I'm going to do is something called a DVerb test. Now, this is a standard test that I tend to use on all Pro Tools systems. It's a good way of giving the processor a good run-in and to also make sure that Pro Tools is behaving correctly. It uses simply a signal generator within Pro Tools that's then recorded into multiple tracks while running Pro Tools' own built-in DVerb plugin. It's a great and useful way of comparing different systems, so you can just count up how many DVerbs are running before the system craps out, and there you've got, some kind of benchmark. So to do that, this is what you do. You go to track, new track, you create an aux input, and you stick in under other, a signal generator. Now that noise, you need to, embrace that noise, because you're going to be hearing that a lot during a DVerb test. So that's a signal generator, just a sine wave being generated by this track. Now what we do is we stick that to output to a single mono bus. Doesn't matter what it's called, doesn't matter what it is, you're just routing within the software. Then we create an audio track, just a single one, and into the insert slot we stick a DVerb. Put it to dry. Use the Alt key just to copy that DVerb. So I've now got 2 in that space. Now if I go to the I/O here and set the input to that same bus as the signal generator, that signal is now coming in to this channel, and if I record enable, we can hear it. That's the signal generator running through the 2 DVerbs. That's easy, isn't it? Then what I'm going to do is duplicate that track a whole load of times, and then set the project into record the signal generator into all those tracks, and that will give us an idea of the performance of the system. Okay, so I'll start off with just these 2 verbs inserted. I'm going to put this fader down. Now standard Pro Tools used to support only 96 tracks of audio. I think that's changed now, but I still use that as a rule of thumb. So I go for 96 tracks. That's what I'm after. 96 tracks with 2 DVerbs on each. So that's 96 times 2, which is 192 plugins. Let's try that. So I go down here, go to duplicate, add on 95 channels of audio. There you are. So I've now got 96 channels of audio, all of them with these 2 DVerbs on. Ready to go. Now the processor system meter down here does react to this quite well, and if we enable all of the tracks for recording, it'll wang up and tell you how much it's using. Previously in Pro Tools on the Surface Pro 4, we would expect the CPU monitor to be bouncing around. We go bop and back and bop and back, and going all over the place. But now it seems to be more or less rock steady, which is interesting. So I've got 96 channels of audio, 2 DVerbs. I'll just set this going just to show you what I mean by the test. So it's all enabled for recording. I'm going to put one of the channels up so that I can hear it, very annoyingly, so that if it starts to click or to pop, I can hear that and I know that something's gone wrong. Otherwise, what we're looking for is for Pro Tools to throw up an error which says that it's out of CPU power, or it can't, or the audio engine is too slow. One of those sorts of error messages. And the way that you sort of quantify this is that you record for 5 minutes. If it can cope with a 5-minute track, then you're pretty much sure that it's going to be completely fine. Because there are variations, and sometimes heat builds up or processing power builds up to the point that after a minute or 2 it might crap out. So it's important to record for a length of time. So I'm going to set this to minutes and seconds. They're all enabled for recording. I'm going to hit record and then play, and off it goes. Now the processor on this particular test has stayed at around 72, 73%. Very, very stable, which is great. And it looks like there's lots more space for more. Maybe I should add some more. So let's do that. Now I don't want to bore you by sitting here adding deverbs and you watching as the CPU meter just creeps up a little bit and creeps up a little bit. So I'm going to cut to the chase. I've been doing this all morning, and what I've got to at the moment is 96 channels of audio, 87 of them with 3 deverbs on, and the rest with 2 deverbs. So that's 279 deverb plugins. When I record enable this, you can still hear that the sine wave is fine, there's no cracking in it, but this is up to peaking at around 95% CPU, which is loads. I mean, other bits of software that we've seen, Ableton Live and Studio One in particular, because they're the ones I've done heavy performance testing on, we saw that it would get to about 70%. We would get 70 odd % before the system started crapping out. But here, we've got 95, 96% of usable CPU room, and it seems to be playing okay. So let's do the test. I don't know if you can hear that the fans on the Surface Book have come on because it's working really hard, but it's still keeping it well under control. Now everything is working slowly because the system is almost completely maxed out. However, let's hit it into record, hit play. And there, it started going. It was a little bit delayed, but unless Pro Tools gives us an error, then Pro Tools is still happy to record, and it is recording. It's recording to disk, committing stuff to disk. It's working fine. It's just right at the edge of what the computer can do. And if it gets to the point where it's not processing audio correctly, it will give us an error message. You can see the timer up here is really struggling to keep that going in real time. And it's difficult to do anything like scroll in the mixer because it all is really, really maxed out. Take it out of record. There, okay. So now we've got our system back. Now as you can see, I have recorded perfect sine waves across every single channel with all that reverb playing. And Pro Tools is fine with it. I mean, I was hitting a ridiculous limit with that 279 plugins. You know, if I'd removed perhaps a dozen tracks or something, the whole thing would work much better. But the fact that it was up to nearly 100% and still working fine, albeit clunkily and slowly in normal navigation, is amazing. I'm stunned by that. I don't know how Avid have somehow pulled it off. It's not normal for me to be talking about Pro Tools on Windows, let alone on a Surface Book that is running at that kind of capability of the system. I have, shut down, started up, restarted, reloaded the project a number of times, and it's still behaving in exactly the same way. So it's not some kind of weirdness. So it's going to be interesting to use a 16-track project and add plugins to that to see how that changes, and also to do some virtual instrument testing. I mean, the Deverb is a simple, it's a decent but simple, not very CPU heavy plugin, and so it should be able to run lots of them as it is. I mean, obviously on a desktop you can run racks and racks of them. You can run 5 per channel, 6 per channel, 7 per channel, depending on how many desktop cores you're running. But on this, the performance is excellent. The fact that I could use almost 100% is excellent. I'm really surprised by that, and pleased, obviously, by that. So let me stop rambling, and I will now do the same test on the Surface Pro 4 just for comparison. Okay? Surface Pro 4 then. This is an i5 as opposed to the i7 of the Surface Book. And this time I've got 92 audio channels with 2 deverbs on each. So that's given me a total of 9,284 plugins. And as you can see, the system usage is up to about 92 to 95%, which is feeling like the limit. you know, the feel of the software is now it can't really do anything else or anything more. So let's hit that into record. Again, as you can see, the timer is, yeah, just about coping with it. It's steady at 92, 94%. All of the cores are being used. Disk and memory usage is fine. It's chunking along. It's recording. That's amazing. That's just amazing. I mean, 184 plugins. The Surface Book seemed to do 279 plugins, which was fantastic. And this, as I've said before, you probably get about a 30% drop or difference in performance between an i5 and an i7. And that's what we're seeing, you know, round that up to 300 plugins, and this is 200 plugins roughly. That's about right. That's a 30%-ish difference. So this is working exactly as expected. And there's no glitch, there's no problem, there's no buzzing or craziness or dropout, and there's no error message in Pro Tools. It's just simply brilliant. I am so pleased with how well this is running, which means you could run to, say, up to 80% plugin usage, and your system is still going to be dreamy and moving and being able to do other stuff. As it is up in the 90s, I can hardly do anything else, which gets to be a bit of a problem because everything is slow. Excellent, there you go. Right, let's do something that doesn't involve this horrible noise. An audio track test, rather than just using sine waves. This is an actual piece of music of 16 tracks of audio that I made up, onto which we're going to dump a whole load of plugins. I'm going to try to use Pro Tools plugins, although obviously I'm going to have to avoid the Air ones because of the nasty effect they have on the scaling. And then I'll try to add some Meteor ones, just to give a flavour of what's possible with a 16-track project. Make sense? Well, so far it's completely fully loaded to the point of explosion. Let me show you that. So ready? Boom! Look at that. So yeah, that's pretty fried already. Now let's have a look to see what I have in here. I've got a channel strip. There you go, a channel strip, an EQ, Native Instruments EQ, Maxim, BF76, and a passive EQ from Native Instruments, solid bus compressor, the RC48 reverb from Softube, and a supercharger. So it's kind of on its level of how far it can do, but let's just play it back to see whether we get anything. Yeah, it's working okay. It's up there 94% it says at the moment. So as I'm sitting here moving things about, the CPU is starting to peak at 100%. So I think that's probably as far as I can get. So it's 9 plugins per channel on 16 channels. Now in Studio One, as I keep referring to that as a comparison, we had a lot of different plugins installed. In fact, we had a whole this particular preset which had 9 plugins ready to go, but they were different plugins. You can't do a side-by-side comparison unless you use absolutely identical plugins, and we're not. So again, this is just an indication, but on a 16-track project like this, you can do some fairly meaty plugins and all the utility plugins you could ever really want to do, and it's going to be fine, absolutely fine. If I add something else to this now, it's just going to fall over. There's no really any point to push it to there, as we can see in the processor meter here that it's already hitting those points. What is remarkable to me is just how stable that is on playback, how it's not plus and minus 10% as it normally expect it to be, that all these cores are filled up pretty evenly. It's really good. I like that a lot. So we're going to dump this on the Surface Pro 4 and watch it catch fire. Surface Pro 4, same 16-track project, same effects loaded, but I've disabled the posh ones at the bottom just to give it a chance. And at the moment it's running somewhere between sort of 60 and 70%. Not quite as stable as the Surface Book, I have to say, but then this has got to work harder to do everything because this is only an i5, the Surface Book is an i7. So let me just play it back as it is. Yeah, that's fine. So let's enable this line of effects. Now that had a big impact on the CPU there. The passive EQ from Native Instruments is causing it a bit of trouble. But you see there when it calmed down, it's now dropped to about 94% when concentrating on playback. And it's fine. It's fine. You know, the system is maxed out, so there's not a whole lot I can do in there. But this is now running, you know, 5 plugins, including an enhanced EQ from Native Instruments. And it's running now a passive EQ from Native Instruments. So that's a lot of good, high-quality plugins dumped onto that one project. And what we're seeing here is the difference between an i5 processor in the Surface Pro 4 and the i7 in the Surface Book. Some kind of virtual instrument test then. Here I am trying to create yet another masterpiece of electronica. Now here at the moment I've just got 3 synth tracks. One uses a reactor, one of the reactor blocks, and then I've got a Prophet and a modular from Arturia. I don't know if you remember, but in Studio One it had a lot of trouble with a single reactor, where in this case it doesn't seem to be a problem quite so much. It's down here under 30% CPU. However, what I have seen in using and just starting making this piece of music is that the CPU usage and system usage is much less stable than it was just using audio plugins. And in fact the behavior is a bit more like how I kind of expected it would be. And I've had the odd wang up to a peak, but that's when I'm doing stuff. It wasn't doing it just on playback or anything like that, or randomly it would do it when I change something or move something about. So I think this is going to be just a little bit more fruity than perhaps we saw before. And also it's completely possible to push it into badness. Let me just demonstrate that. I've just got a keyboard here connected up. I've got the stage piano from Arturia plugged in, and I also have a sustain pedal, so I can create a whole bunch of notes to really mess it about. So if you look at the CPU meter down here, it should, let me bring that up perhaps up to the top. There we go. See that a bit better? So as I add a load of notes, you can see that rise, and then it craps out. That's the kind of crapping out that we're expecting to see. It's also interesting when you look at that it's on a single core. That rises with. So that says something about the multi-threaded nature either of the Arturia synth or of Pro Tools, or maybe both. I don't know. Generally I think in my experience with Pro Tools it does like to run something on a single core. You know, one thing, that core, another thing, the next core. That seems to be how it works and what I've observed. Anyway, if I play along to this other 3 tracks that's going on here, you'll be able to see that it can completely hold it together under normal usage. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add in a few more synths just to see at which point it breaks. Okay, I've now developed my masterpiece into 8 tracks. Let's see how we're going with that. As you can see, the CPU meter is up to about 40%, and it's moving about. It's not as stable and as steady as it was running purely audio plugins. What we've got loaded here so far is a reactor blocks, a Prophet, a modular, an ARP, a SEM, a stage piano, a Jupiter, and another reactor blocks. Now this is dealing with Reactor far better than Studio One did, which was very interesting. I think what I'll do now is duplicate all these tracks and see whether it still holds together. So I'm up to 24 channels of all these synths. Let's see how that fares. Yeah, they're still very well behaved. I think on Studio One we got up to sort of 27, I think, and that was about all it could do, but that was hitting round about 70% system usage, or at least that's what was indicated in the software, and that's the point at which it couldn't handle anymore. Whereas here we're hitting sort of between 60 and 70%, and yet we know that Pro Tools potentially could do more. So I think we need to do some more duplication. Aha! We finally ran out of power. Okay, that's good. We got an error message in Pro Tools saying ran out of CPU power, tried deactivating or removing some plugins. What a good idea, Pro Tools. Thank you for that. So 40 instruments then playing back, and I got pretty good playback out of it. I started messing around and moving things around, which was making the system work that little bit harder, and at that point it peaked and couldn't quite cope with it. But 40 instruments, these are not simple instruments. I mean, I've got a couple of reactor blocks in there, which means I have actually 8 reactor blocks in there, along with a whole stack of Arturia synths, which is all good stuff. I mean, I'm not playing masses of chords, I'm playing lots of single lines and bits and pieces, but they're all there and they're all working, and that's 40 instruments running in Pro Tools on the Surface Book i7. That ain't bad. That ain't bad at all. Now, I really must stress that your mileage may vary. It depends massively on the sort of synths you're using, the sort of polyphony you're using, whether you're using sample-based or processor-based instruments, the audio interface you're using. Lots of factors are involved. So what I am trying to do here is just to give you an indication of what can be possible. You may get much better results. You may not get anything quite like this. It just depends on what you're using. If you want to stick Vienna Symphonic Library in here and try to run 40 instances of that, I think you may run into trouble. But with this mixture and combination of what it is that I'm using, I've got 40 of them out of it, more or less. And if I was to back it off to say 30 tracks, I think it would be pretty comfortable and easy to use. Synth test on the Surface Pro 4 then, same project. This time I've only got 20 instruments loaded to see how that goes, and already the processor meter is moving about a lot more than it did on the Surface Book, which is quite interesting. However, during playback it seemed to sort itself out, and now the processor is running quite steadily around 70%, which is quite interesting. Let's see if I can add a couple more, just for comparison's sake. That's 24 since loaded. It's 80% plus, getting up to 90% in places. It seems to behave itself on playback. However, when you drop out of playback, it struggles a bit more and it now starts to shoot up to 100%. So slightly stranger behavior, I suppose, or rather less consistent behavior in the Surface Pro 4. However, I usually expect to hit around 70% on the Surface Pro 4 when using any other DAW and expect to find trouble. That's about where the limits tend to be. Whereas here it's going beyond that, which is very interesting. However, as you can see, it's now starting to jump into the red, so I think that's probably about as much as the Surface Pro 4 can handle. So after a long day of testing yesterday, what have we found out? Well, above everything else, we've found out that Pro Tools by Avid version 12.7 is running really well on the Surface Book and the Surface Pro 4. I mean, it's amazing to me that a year ago we had this. You see that meter zooming up and down again? And you can hear the clicks. Whereas now we have this. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, Pro Tools is one of the first pieces of audio software that I ran on the Surface Pro 4 when I first got it last year. And I instantly ran into problems. I had all these videos lined up to make about, you know, the performance testing and doing different things and using the pen and mixing in Pro Tools on touch. And it all just went completely out the window because I could not get Pro Tools to run. I would go back to my Surface Pro 3, working perfectly. Go to the Surface Pro 4, click, pop, it was just a nightmare, and I had to just decide to write Pro Tools off. And it's from that point, heading towards the mega test, that we discovered that there were all these underlying problems in the Surface Pro 4 that were preventing many bits of software from working as they should. However, now, a year down the line, after lots of firmware updates, lots of Windows updates, and of course updates to Pro Tools as well, we find that it actually runs rather beautifully. I don't think that's something I ever imagined that I would be saying about Pro Tools and the Surface. But here I am. It's quite remarkable. As I've mentioned, I mean, all other DAWs that I've used tend to start to crap up at about 70%, 80% CPU usage. Pro Tools is going up to 95 and it's still playing back perfectly. Now, of course, we need to take performance meters in software with a huge grain of salt. It's not really telling us anything scientific. It's just giving us an indication as to what the system can do. And that seems to be borne out in the tests that I've done. Also, it can vary dramatically depending on what plugins you're using, what audio interface you're using, and the sort of music and intensity of your projects. So all I can offer you is the evidence that I've done on this system at this time with these projects, with these plugins and with these instruments. Your mileage may vary depending on the stuff that you're doing and the stuff that you're using. But what I can say with an awful lot of confidence is that I have no trouble in recommending Pro Tools for the Surface Book and the Surface Pro 4. It will do the job. It will let you do projects and recording and making music and composing and all the sorts of things that it's supposed to do. You know, within the limits of the sort of processor that it is. But there doesn't now appear to be any unexpected or artificial barriers to it working properly for music. So get yourself a decent audio interface, get yourself a USB hub, plug in the iLock and your interface and your MIDI controller and run Pro Tools and you can make music. That's all we've ever wanted to do. That's all we've ever been interested in, making music. And now you can. Hurrah! So that So that hopefully is Pro Tools 12.7 running on a Surface Book i7, running on a Surface Pro 4 i5. There you are. Happy trails. So if you've been worried about moving to a Surface Book, perhaps from a MacBook Pro or some other system because you're not sure whether it's going to work all right, you've seen my mega test and you've seen how terrible it's all been, well, we can now move on because it's great. Go do it. Go make some music. And once you get your Surface Book, then check back onto this YouTube channel to find my tweaking guide to how to set it all up to give you the best possible music production performance. And I'll keep on making videos about music making, about using a pen and using touch and integrating Surface into a larger studio music making, music performance setup. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe, follow, tweet, retweet, all that sort of jazz. And until next time, go and make some tunes.